Okay, welcome to the presentation by KOTTranslations for Intro to CAD on the lessons that we learned during our group project. So our project was a series of articles in the art domain. They were all articles about the sculptor Rodionova. The first was a catalog article translation of about 20 pages from Russian to English. The second was a 200-word newspaper article translation from English to Russian. And the third was a website post that was translated using MT and post-edit, also from Russian to English. For our reference files, we had a PDF of the catalog in Russian, and it already had some English names and pictures of some of the artwork, but it didn't have all the information that you would need to know what the artwork should be called and what it actually was, because some of it was missing.
There were several steps in our project. First of all, it's pseudo translation, which was very helpful, and we talked about this a little bit later. Then translation itself, editing, and creation of translation memory and term base for all three of our articles.
So we did have a detailed plan before we began, and we meant to follow it, but a lot of things came up, and with our inexperience in this area, we realized that we didn't follow our plan accordingly as we expected.
So in order for a plan to actually work and function as it should, there has to be follow-up. So for instance, we could have implemented 12 Trello workflows so that everybody could check off what they're doing and everybody knew what they're supposed to be doing at a certain time.
And we definitely needed some reminders. Maybe we could implement some reminder tool next time.
Yeah, I think that would be a good for me as well.
Basically, also life sort of got in the way because we had a lot of other work going on for classes and travel with Thanksgiving, and it was sort of hard to get together and communicate, make sure that everybody was doing what they were supposed to do.
We also learned that Trados were not one of our strong points. I think some of us would have rather preferred MemoQ. It's a little bit easier to use, I would agree.
We had issues with getting the packages to the right place and getting the translation memory to the right place and the term base. It was just very difficult because sometimes we would send a translation and then the person who received it would come back and say, wait a second, there's a whole bunch of segments missing. It would turn out to be an earlier version. And it was just really difficult to get all the parts moving. And I think sometimes too, Trados just has some technical hiccups that just make it not work the way it's supposed to be and do what it's supposed to do.
And Trados, I think it's very suitable for big corporations, for big projects, and with lots of technical maintenance from technical savvy people. But for the project like this, I think it's more reasonable to use easier tools such as MemoQ.
I prefer Trados' QA functions, but I think the extra time it takes to deal with Trados would end up costing a client money because it just doesn't do what you want most of the time, we found, at least with our level of Trados expertise.
So we did learn how to implement pseudo translation and how it is very useful in checking that everything's going according to how we planned. And it's key to do this kind of quality assurance check on longer translations, especially.
I found actually that even though I loaded the translation memory, that some of the segments, even though they were a perfect match, somehow still did not make it into the target translation. So I had to it was going through and doing the QA to check that all segments were filled, even though it seems like, how can you skip segments? When a translation is, around 20 pages, that's actually a lot of segments. So it was really important for me to go back and make sure that I had filled in all the segments and that we had everything.
Yeah, and this terms reviewing function was very helpful as well.
Okay. It's also important to have a style guide because this was a client that I had worked for 7 or 8 years. So a lot of the sort of standards that they have in place are things that I actually came up with. But it's important and I have started a style guide for them before, but I never finished it. So I think going forward, we would make sure, if we were to continue to work with this client, to actually create the style guide in reality, so that everybody knew what the standards were. And it's just not helpful for it to exist only in my head. It has to be something that everybody can access.
Great.
So I will say that one of our concluding ideas we came up with is communication is key. We need to be communicating all the time to make sure all the steps are done according to the schedule, and so that we can get things efficient and on time.
And organization is also a very important part of any kind of project and translation project as well. And it was one of our weaknesses, but after this project we know how to work on this better and how to organize ourselves better.
We had a really good plan for how everything should be organized, and had it been followed, it would have worked out really well. But because once we made our Gantt chart and planned everything, we basically forgot about it. It didn't make a difference that we had this great organization and timeline, because we didn't actually use it. So in the future, we will make sure that if we take the time to actually organize the project, we will follow the organization and put in basically safeguards in place to make sure that we are following it and everybody's clear on what they need to be doing at a certain time. So I think that is what we will take from this project, is to make sure to actually use the organization systems that we create.